Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Boardroom, where, as always, we're speaking with some of Malta's leading business minds to understand the key topics that we should be interested in at the moment. And what a great topic we have for you today. We're going to be talking about the future of finance and how all our lives, all our businesses could potentially be affected by the changes that are taking place at the moment. We are live at the moment here on Facebook, so if you have a question for our panel, please do add it below and we'll try to get it to them as part of this interview. If you don't catch this live, then you can watch this back on who'swho.mt, Malta's leading business portal. Now, as I said, today's conversation is all about the future of finance, what finance in the next few years and decades to come is going to look like, how that's going to affect the business community and the world at large. And to help me understand a little more about that, I have a fantastic panel with me today. Very honored to welcome with us Joshua Ellul. He's the director of the Center for DLT at the University of Malta. Dr. Jonathan Galea, who's the CEO of BCA Solutions, and Thy-Diep Ta, who's the co-founder of Unit Ventures and DLT Talents. Thank you so much, panel, for being with me today. A really exciting conversation ahead of us. And I've heard the period that we're in at the moment likened to the start of the internet. So perhaps the mid to late 90s, when we were all, just hearing about the internet, dial-up was coming into our lives, and possibly we were all, fighting with our parents to try to get online and use MIRC and some of the tools we used to use back then. And I guess as a result, it's quite difficult to imagine what this phase at the moment could mean for us in 20 years or so to come. No way could we have imagined that we'd be carrying the internet around with us in our pockets back then. So perhaps you could help me to try and understand, and our viewers to understand, what this could look like in 10 to 15 years to come. And Josh, I'm going to come to you first.
Yep. So many say that this is a revolution that we're going to be seeing. And if you think about how the internet changed services, it allowed for us to use services from our computers, wherever we were, our homes or offices. And then the mobile revolution came about, and we could use these same services from just by reaching into our pockets. And this revolution is a bit different because it's not really changing the way that we're going to interact with services. So it's a bit harder to comprehend. But what it is changing is the level of trust that we need to have in service providers. For example, when it comes to finance, let's say the cryptocurrency alternative, we no longer need a bank to approve or disapprove transactions. I can directly send digital funds to someone else, and there's no single authority who can be in between that transaction. When it comes to other services, we can have things like self-sovereign ownership of property, where there's no land registry, where I am the owner of my land, and I can send my land directly to someone else. So it's really this movement of decentralization, removing central powers, and I think that is quite an exciting. It's quite an exciting time to be in this field.
Amazing, and it's great to hear you say it's exciting. I'm sure a number of our viewers are sitting here thinking, "My mind is blown. I can't possibly understand what this is going to mean." But just like it was in the internet, obviously, it won't happen from today to tomorrow. It's starting to be rolled out. Am I right? That's something that over time will start to become clearer for us. But nevertheless, as early adopters, as people who sort of are, in the business community, it's important for us to be understanding how this will change things for us. And Jonathan, if I could come to you for your thoughts on that question as well. What is the future going to look like? How is finance going to change?
I think in order to answer the question about the future, we need to go to the past first, whereby when there was the start of the internet revolution in the late 90s, we saw that there was a mad scramble between various entities, between various service providers, let's say that, to see who would actually be crowned as kings and queens of the internet revolution that we're currently living through now. And we saw certain giants like Microsoft, Apple, Google, and the rest, which, took those crowns. Now, I think we'll go through a cycle where some of these perhaps service providers and some of the, giants that we've seen forming will go through a cycle of whereby we'll go through the process of decentralization. And some services that we're used to nowadays, be it e-commerce and be it even the provision of certain banking services, will go back, and the power over such services will go back to the users. So this cycle, this process will be gradual, but I think that we'll be seeing more of it taking place in the next 10 to 20 years.
Okay, more exciting stuff there, more bandwagons to jump on the back of. John, thank you very much. And Diep, to come over to you for your thoughts on this. I know you're very interested in the human side of what this technology will mean for the future. Perhaps you could give us a little bit of insight from your perspective.
Of course. So for me, looking at the decentralized economy, it's a bit like looking at a transition from a place of the internet. Yeah, when I look at the internet and how it's being used, when I kind of grew up, the internet was just used to access a library of information. It was very cumbersome and so on. And then I went to my teenage years or to my university times. We started to create content for the internet, the rise of social media, the rise of Facebook. I remember clearly how it was in the beginning when I was one of the first to be connected in the world with people from the US living in Germany. I was so fascinated. I created content on MySpace, for example. So that was basically the era of user-generated content. And I think now with mobile and cloud storage and all these kinds of different ways to connect each other across the globe, we still haven't solved one big issue, which is like, now I generate content, but how do I actually get to, also benefit from the content that I have generated? So I think the next move, and we're seeing it in the decentralized world, is a movement towards providing infrastructure and tools like applications on top of the infrastructure to help users, like every single individual, not only access the internet, but also monetize it in a way where they can benefit from it without losing the major share of their creation to a centralized authority, or not even earning anything from it when you look at like Facebook, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the internet of value, actually, which is to come and which we are building using decentralized technologies.
Yeah, well, that is a human way of looking at it, isn't it? The internet of value. That's something that starts to bring it down in human terms a little bit. And John, I'll come to you. We've seen the rise of decentralized finance, which we call DeFi, in the past year. What are your thoughts on how this is going to impact traditional finance?
I guess I can start off by saying that DeFi will not wipe out centralized finance, or CeFi, as it's called colloquially, I guess. There are certain fears or let's say hopes, depending on your perspective, that, for example, banks will be wiped out. I think that the monopoly that banks have currently on the worldwide financial system is not something that can be either wiped out either in the short term or in the long term. But what we'll be seeing is that the way that, let's say, finance in general is handled, we'll see that monopoly starting to decrease, and certain, let's say, services offered by banks, such as loans, will start those being offered in a more decentralized manner. DeFi in general stands for anything that is offered in a decentralized manner, and typically DeFi operates through the use of blockchain technology. So, for example, be it the exchange from one currency to another, be it the offering of loans, all these things can be offered in a decentralized manner. And this is what gave rise to the whole DeFi space. And we're currently seeing, for example, certain applications which are run on blockchain technology, whereby, for example, the exchange from one currency to another is offered in a completely decentralized manner without the approval of any centralized party, and completely run via technology. So this has shown us that in reality, we don't need to have centralized intermediaries to actually approve certain functions and certain services or certain processes. And with the removal of those intermediaries, we have the reduction in cost and also the increase in efficiency. So this particular experiment, let's call it that, is proving to be successful. Now, how will banks react? Obviously, we'll see certain banks saying, hey, our role is that of a gatekeeper to the financial world, and our role as a gatekeeper can certainly subsist even through the use of decentralized technologies. So I think that's what will actually happen. However, certain, let's say, services I mentioned earlier on which banks currently have a monopoly, I think those will actually trickle down to, let's say, the man on the street, the person on the street, let's say that. And we'll see certain functions which currently belong to banks actually being undertaken either by other institutions, and we've already seen that through the rise of digital banks, or otherwise outrun being run purely through technology.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. I'll stay with you just to understand a little bit more, because different jurisdictions are also proposing central bank digital currencies known as CBDCs. Perhaps you could give us a little bit of an intro into what they are and what their relevance is.
Yeah, so currently I would say that currencies across various jurisdictions are still mostly represented in physical format first and foremost. We do have bank accounts, we do have the concept of electronic money, but e-money at the end of the day represents the physical currency that is stored either by a credit institution or by a financial institution. Now, a central bank digital currency, a CBDC, represents a currency that purely exists in a virtual format. So that would be the main difference between currencies we know nowadays and a CBDC. Moreover, CBDCs are being proposed to run on blockchain networks. Now, one of the other main differences between CBDCs and normal currencies is that a CBDC is issued by a central bank or another central authority, and it is directly held by the users of that particular currency. At the current, in the current environment, let's say that the currency itself is held by credit institutions, who in turn give access to such currency to their own users. Whereas with a CBDC, the access to such a currency would be directly in the hands of the users themselves. This would potentially mean that credit institutions, typically commercial banks, would be cut out from the equation, and there would be a direct link between central banks and the users themselves, the users of the currency. And that would be, of course, one of the main considerations to keep in mind when considering CBDCs. Will CBDCs replace let's say, the concept of currency as we know it? For the large part, yes. However, will CBDCs replace certain other currencies, cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin? I would say no, because here with CBDCs, we still have a central issuer issuing the token itself, the currency itself, and ultimately acting as, let's say, the monopolized party, which would be entirely in control of that particular currency. Whereas with currencies such as Bitcoin, there's no centralized authority control, there's no centralized issuer, and there we're talking about the decentralized currency, which is completely at odds of what the CBDC actually stands for. So I think in the future, what we'll see is that CBDCs will replace traditional physical currencies, and that we'll also see, let's call it a standoff between centralized currencies in the form of CBDCs and decentralized currencies such as Bitcoin.
Okay. Very interesting intel there, Jonathan. Thank you. Josh, I know that you also have an interest in this area. What can you add to what Jonathan said there?
Yeah, so many say that CBDCs are there to kill cryptocurrencies or the decentralized cryptocurrencies. And you may see it that way, that that's their aim, because banking institutions do want to keep control. And so many in the area are against CBDCs. However, at the same time, CBDCs overnight could onboard all our banking users. Suddenly, all our banking users around the world are now familiar with this new type of technology. It's true, it's not decentralized, it's not our typical cryptocurrencies where we're removing central authorities, but now people are aware of what this type of technology can bring. Then it's up to the people to decide, are we happy with our heavily centralized banking system, or do we want to move more towards a more decentralized system? And so I think that's the really interesting thing that we're going to see over the next 10 years or so. CBDCs are at various stages of development. So China claims to be well ahead. Europe is still looking into it to a large regard. And one very interesting part of what we can achieve with CBDCs is automation of certain processes. So using blockchain and what we call smart contracts, we can automate all sorts of processes that take lots of time. So if the four of us came up with, let's say, a company, we could write a smart contract that receives all the funds, automatically pays who it needs to pay, and divides our profits at the end of the year. And we could remove a lot of the accounting overheads. And we can come up with these for all sorts of things. CBDCs, if they implement smart contracts on top of it, could really automate a lot of our lives. And that's quite exciting. So there's the exciting part, which is what the technology can bring in terms of automation and more efficient processes. But then there's the interesting part in, what do we really want as people? Do we really want to decentralize the powers, or are we happy with the centralized powers? And I think that is the interesting question that we will now start to see unravel.
Okay, thank you, Josh. And staying with you for a little bit of insight, I mean, Malta was really ahead of the game when this all sort of came to the fore a few years ago. And some would argue that perhaps we've lost our relevance a little bit in the space. What would you say are the steps that we should take if we want to become relevant again?
That's right. So, I mean, Malta has a lot of challenges ahead of it in these times. So reputation, we have to really overcome our reputational issues. Besides that, what we should be doing is not being too loud yet. Let's not go out there and say we have everything and please come to Malta. Right now, let's get everything in place. Let's make sure that our ecosystem is set up. Let's make sure that the industry is happy with the regulatory framework that there is and that it's correctly operating. Then once we see that we've created this ecosystem, which is not just the regulatory framework, it's seeing players set up, it's seeing educational institutions offering programs of worth. Once we see this all developing, then let's go out there and bring other big players to Malta. Now, it's quite interesting to also note that whilst there was a lot of hype in the beginning and a lot of people believe that it all died, that's not the case. There are a lot of big players that remained in Malta. There are a lot of unsung heroes in Malta you don't even hear about. We have very large infrastructure, blockchain infrastructure operating in Malta, and you don't hear about them, but because they don't care about the news and the hype. And the thing is as well, really, when they said all these companies are coming to Malta, this is a startup sector, and startups, 9 out of 10 go bust. We don't want loads of companies going bust in Malta. So at the end of it, I don't think it's a terrible thing. I think we just need to be prudent in making sure that we have realistic, strong, robust framework that helps build a reputation, and then we should help by attracting more players once we've reached that stage.
Okay, thank you, Josh. That's great to kind of put it into perspective and help viewers to understand how things have progressed since that original hype. Jonathan, obviously you're also very well versed in the local sector. What are your thoughts on how we can become more relevant at this stage?
I think that first and foremost, there needs to be a bit of a change in terms of mentality of how we see the crypto sector and the general DLT sector, I would say. Back in 2018, when the DLT regulatory framework was announced, again, there was a lot of attention being, of course, given to Malta and a lot of companies setting up their operations over here. However, when Malta started going through certain issues in terms of its reputation and image, unfortunately, what was becoming apparent is that the DLT industry in general was being seen as one of the, let's say, items of baggage that you throw off the ship as soon as water starts coming in. And that's absolutely not the approach that we want to have in place, because the DLT sector in general is revolutionary. I mean, it's not only going to, let's say, change the way that we do finance, but as Joshua mentioned earlier on, it's going to change a lot of the things that we interact with on a daily basis. So simply taking the DLT sector in general and throwing it off board is something that we need to stop doing. And we've managed to strike gold when we came up with the DLT regulator framework, and we've actually received praise from overseas regulatory authorities on how we have handled both the technical side of the industry and also the financial side. And I think we should put all our efforts once again into changing what needs to be changed, but sending a clear message out there that we mean business when it comes to the DLT and the blockchain sector. And we need to make this particular sector one of the strongholds of our economy. We need to turn it into one of our economic pillars. Because if we don't do that, then someone else will, and other countries are actually doing that already, and we will lose the lead that we managed to get in 2018 just as easily.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Jonathan. And it's interesting that you bring up reputation there, which of course is something that comes up a lot on this show. But yep, I'm going to come to you now to talk a little bit about the reputation of of crypto, of blockchain in general. It can be a little bit muddied, but I'd love to get your insight on how this technology can be used as a force for good.
Yes. So in general, it's technology, and technology is neither good nor bad, right? It's a bit like a knife, I would say, and it depends on the intention you use it for, and also the skills that you have, and that you basically build the right infrastructure around using it in a wise way. So there needs to be some kind of protection systems around so you don't cut your fingers, you don't hurt other people. You need to be trained in a certain way that you know how to use the knife and for what use cases to use the knife. Because sometimes, what type of knife are you going to use to cut a mango and what type of knife are you going to use to cut, I don't know, a fillet? Might be different. It's a knife in the end. And in terms of looking at blockchain as a force for good, if we now think about half of the population doesn't have access, for example, to banking services, right? But with blockchain technologies and decentralized finance, you enable everybody in the world to get access to the same terms and conditions that any single person in the Western or more developed world, for example, gets access to. If I use decentralized finance protocols, I basically can get the same interest rates as Jonathan, Joshua, myself are getting if I sit in the local rural village in Bangladesh or in Vietnam, which is just like from a mindset perspective, huge. Of course, there's a long way to get there. We have to show the people that how it works. Basically, we have to set up the infrastructure to get it done in a way that we can use it to solve some of the world's most pressing problems.
Okay. Very interesting. Thank you. Yep. And I know that we do have this sort of feeling of good versus evil. You've explained it so well when it comes to a knife in the right hands. A knife is great and we get to eat really great things with it. And then in the wrong hands, of course, it can cause a lot of challenges. For you, what is this? How does this frame in your mind, this good versus the dark side of crypto? And yep, I'll come to you first on this one.
Yes. So when I talk about the good sides, I can think about how do we use technology to facilitate things such as the Sustainable Development Goals, like the 17 goals defined by the United Nations and ratified by more than 190 countries across the globe, about how do we build a more sustainable future. And then they are broken down into 17 sub-goals. One of them, for example, how do we use it to bring fair and equitable education? How do we reduce inequality? How do we reduce poverty? So all of these, like when we combine technology and cost efficiency, like Jonathan said earlier, with a noble goal, then we can go very far. Now we can talk about the downsides of it. It's not regulated at the moment. It's a bit elitist in the way that you need to understand a lot about the technicalities around it to use it in a good way and also to not be scammed. I would say a lot of projects that are coming up every day in the market, maybe 99% of the new projects that you see popping up every day are not sustainable, not fundamental. So how do we set up systems to differentiate between the signal and the noise, maybe in the market, of which noise we have a lot? And maybe it's because we don't have a globally defined standard of what is good, what is ethical, and what do we all agree on. And there are certain initiatives working on it. So it's not like nobody wants to do that and everybody is neglecting it, but it takes time to build these global efforts. And I'm stopping here and hearing my co-panelists share their views.
Thank you for that. And yes, Josh, I'll come to you, in fact, for, again, a little bit of insight in this good versus evil side of this technology.
Yeah, so I think it's very important to disambiguate to people out there, because a lot of people confuse cryptocurrency and blockchain and put it all into the same basket. And we need to differentiate it too. So a lot of people say, oh no, cryptocurrency is used for illegal stuff, therefore blockchain must be bad too. Well, that's like saying that a bank has done something illegal, therefore let's not use a particular type of database, which is software. So one is technology, one is financial. Now, when it comes to cryptocurrency, let's look at the reality. Cryptocurrency is used for illicit activity, and it's used for normal activity, just like cash is, and just like even banks has been set up for illicit activity. So the argument that crypto is only used for illicit activity, it goes out the window once you realize that all our other monetary systems are used for illicit activity. Not only that, cryptocurrency, because it's built on blockchain, provides an immutable log, a history that can never be changed of transactions. And this is now helping the enforcement officers and all the different agencies to find illicit and illegal activity. And so the benefits that both blockchain bring and crypto bring to the financial world are transparency, auditability, and democratization. And these are principles that are very hard to argue, that are not in the vision for the greater good. So I would just add that.
That's great. Thanks, Josh. Lots of insight there. And John, again, this is a big topic, so let's dive in with you as well. The good versus evil debate. Where do you sit on it?
I think both Yip and Joshua explained themselves quite clearly, and I agree with their views as well. What I would add is that the, there's been a lot of, let's say, negative media a few years back. You don't even find it nowadays on how, for example, Bitcoin is primarily used for money laundering. And there have been various studies, including one conducted by an ex-director of the CIA, which actually arrived to the conclusion that the use of Bitcoin for illicit activity is, first of all, very minute. Secondly, doesn't even compare to the use of traditional currencies, such as the US dollar and the euro, for such illicit activities. And as Joshua correctly mentioned, each and every transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain, for example, is recorded. And there are various cases, various news articles on mainstream portals, which actually report about certain uses of Bitcoin for illicit activity. And since they use Bitcoin for such illicit activity, it actually aided the investigators and the authorities to crack down on the criminals which made use of Bitcoin for such illicit activities. Nowadays, for example, the narrative is that Bitcoin is bad for the environment, but in reality, the process of producing Bitcoin is largely backed by renewable energy resources. So again, there's been attacks on cryptocurrencies in general, time and time again. Ultimately, we're looking at a system whereby finance as we know it is changing. And in the case of Bitcoin, for example, there's the strong use case for it of financial inclusion. As Yip mentioned, almost half of the world's population is currently unbanked, and they can never have access to a bank account because, first of all, they might not have the monetary resources for it. Secondly, they would not have a fixed account of residence. And since to open a bank account, you need a fixed address, then obviously you can never have a bank account. So these are excluded from the financial system. Through cryptocurrencies, just Bitcoin, they can be re-included in the financial system. Secondly, there is the whole concept of privacy, which is being trampled upon by the giants that I mentioned earlier on. And it's time that privacy is, well, regarded as a sacred right, is enshrined in conventions such as the ECHR. And in practice, we need to take it back. So having privacy over what we do with our money, not because we want to do something illicit with it, just because we want to conserve and protect our own data and our own doings, I think that is something that needs to be taken seriously. And of course, it's one of the main benefits of using cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. And to stay with this slightly, Yip, earlier you mentioned the SDGs, the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. And perhaps you can give us a case study of how this technology has been used in a positive way here.
Okay. So maybe when I look at, there's many different use cases and they're all scattered around because I don't think we have managed to create a nice library of working use cases. The industry is too early for that. One of the good projects that have been happening has been about identification. I think the United Nations World Food Program has made good use of blockchain to distribute and allocate value to the different refugees all around the world. It was millions of users in the area of Syria, Jordan in the latest crisis. And then there's use cases, and maybe Jonathan can actually share them because he has been advising some of these protocols using green energy, like linking green energy protocols to cryptocurrency and making the system more efficient. And then when we think about reducing inequality for like reducing inequality, that's the use cases that I talked about earlier. We can teach people to make use of the understanding of the network, which is open source actually, where everybody can participate and become an active contributor, being rewarded, like earning money using cryptocurrencies. So you could imagine how do you actually earn cryptocurrencies? By contributing to the crypto economy. For example, you can contribute in securing the network Thereby you become either a miner or a staker, depending on the different technical protocols you use to secure the network. And actually, every data center in the world, that could be universities, for example, in underdeveloped regions, could use their data power to secure networks, contribute to that, and earn actually crypto rewards. You could actually contribute. It doesn't matter how little money cryptocurrencies you have, you can contribute to providing liquidity to a pool to make these open source systems actually work. So these are different use cases where each person, even if they only had €1 of investment, could contribute and participate in the same amount as any other, what we call large scale investor, could invest and earn in the system, which is quite revolutionary.
Absolutely, really fascinating, and I know that all three of you are very keen on blockchain education, and you see that the education side of things is critical to the success of this in the future. Josh, can I come to you perhaps to start this conversation about why education is critical for this?
Yep. So actually in Malta, we started to realize that it's not just about technology. We realized this early on when there were a lot of professionals around the table, lawyers, techies, business professionals, trying to come up with the regulatory framework and all sorts of other aspects. And we all have a different perspective. We all have a different way of speaking. And we noticed that we need multidisciplinary education where we get our professionals up to speed in their discipline, but they also become literate in the other disciplines. So we've taken an approach at the University of Malta that focuses on that multidisciplinary approach. And that's really training the experts, but that's not good enough. We need to also train the layman out there. What does this technology mean to them? So we do need to start working on programs to help individuals come up to speed on what is cryptocurrency, what is blockchain, and what does it mean to them. And to say the truth, I don't even think they need to know what it is and how it works, because we don't talk about what SMTP is. We talk about sending each other an email. So I think a drive just for awareness is the right approach, I would say.
Okay, Josh, thank you. And you're right. You know, when you break it down like that, it sounds so simple, so obvious, and obviously education is going to be critical for that. Jonathan, do you have anything to add to how education could help?
I completely agree with Joshua. I think that for a number of years, there's been the misconception that in order to make use of cryptocurrencies, for example, they need to understand exactly how cryptocurrency works, how a blockchain works. Now, first of all, you need to be extremely well versed in mathematics and cryptography in order to understand how cryptocurrencies actually work. And I would say that only a very, very small part of the population actually have the necessary technical knowledge to understand it at grassroots level. What's more important is to actually wrap our heads around certain concepts like decentralization, to truly understand, for example, how our data is being handled, to know what it means to be included within the global financial system. If we manage to get an understanding of those very, let's say, some might term them as basic concepts, as fundamental concepts, but the surprising reality is that not a lot of people actually take the time to grasp such concepts and understand them at a fundamental level. So, as I mentioned earlier on, there needs to be a certain change in the general mentality. I'm not just speaking about Malta, I'm speaking about, let's say, the world in general, that we actually understand how it means to operate a decentralized system versus a centralized system, and also what it means to actually be in control of our own data and our own privacy once again.
Okay, thank you, John. And yep, coming to you there, again, I know education is an important part of your own personal goals. What would you say about how we need to educate people in this space?
Yeah. I think it's important to understand which part of the ecosystem we want to play in, or of this societal shift we actually want to contribute to. Either do we want to just be a user, then it's fine to just understand, how to use the product. I actually think fundamentally we have the chance right now as a society to include minorities into the discussion of shaping the industry going forward, which traditionally not have been included. For example, I'm just speaking about women in tech. Like all the systems that have been created until now, there has not been very much female participation. And that is maybe because women didn't think that they would ever be able to understand it, and then they stopped shaping the system. So now bring it back to the current state of blockchain technology and also cryptocurrencies. It's so new that now we can still include a lot of people that can then contribute to scale the system and build it, and include considerations that they find important into the shaping of the ecosystem, like ethics, I don't know, diversity, equality, everything that you want to care about and want to give into the system, you need to give it in now as the system is being created. So I'm developing programs for women, teaching women in leadership positions how to become blockchain literate. And with literate, I do think we need something like basic understanding of the ABC of the system, and then see where do we want to dive deeper and what is enough for us because we just want to use it. We don't want to shape it. But we do need to have this public discussion of what is actually needed for somebody to be able to become a leader in that system and create the companies and create the features that this industry needs to evolve.
Really fascinating. Thank you so much. And I'll stay with you, Yip, for a little bit of understanding in what are the great ways for society to participate in these future finance models. If people are watching this and they're starting to think, okay, I want to get involved, what do they need to do?
Yeah, I think it's very helpful to find a good, either a coach or a good university program. You can actually, for example, go to Malta University and check out the work that Joshua is doing. I have a few programs where we run through the ecosystem in a very structured way so that you have basic skills to navigate and then see where you want to go deeper. There's a lot of free online courses where you can just take a few hours to just get a basic understanding and then really use it first and understand where are the pain points of the ecosystem right now. And you will see that it's a bit complicated still, and then you will understand, okay, what would I actually need to change, or what is needed to change to make it work for not only people like me, like early pioneers, but for the mainstream users.
Okay, thank you. Josh, for a little bit of insight there on your thoughts on that, what would you say?
So this is not financial advice. So actually, I would say try it out on a test network to make sure it's not financial advice. Just get some tokens, send some tokens, use some decentralized games, buy some crypto kitties. Just get immersed in what the technology is. And if you have a few euros to spare, use some real money, lose that real money, understand the pains in the system. The tooling is getting better day by day, month by month. So I think it's just good to get people's hands dirty, and over time, they'll become versed in it.
That's great advice from you both. Thank you. And Jonathan, your advice on that side of things?
Yeah, I definitely agree that experience is the best teacher. I would say that first of all, don't view cryptocurrencies as just a get-rich-quick scheme, because first of all, that's not its purpose. Secondly, you'll just lose money if you look at it that way. On the other hand, if you take the time to understand it, and best thing to do would actually be to buy a very, very small amount. I mean, can even be tens of euros, and just dabble with it, send payments, just see actually how it works. That would be the best teacher of all. Of course, there is ample literature available now, as opposed to a few years ago. So there is a lot of material that one can read, be it just to have a basic understanding of crypto, be it to actually understand it at a much more detailed level, and beyond crypto. And nowadays, we're also seeing some practical uses of blockchain technology that goes beyond crypto. Once again, maybe this might not be something that is easily accessible by the public, because it will be running in the back end. But still, reading about it and asking questions to those who actually know what they're saying, I think that's also a good way to learn more about technology and start to understand it.
Okay. Well, thank you there so much to the three of you for giving that sort of like starter advice to our viewers. And as we wrap up our conversation today, I'd love to come to you just for one final tip. If you have one piece of advice for our viewers today, perhaps the business people watching the show, people who might want to get involved, they might see themselves as potential early adopters. What would be your one tip to round off our future of finance discussion today? And yep, I'm going to come to you first.
Get engaged now. Like, the train is running and you don't want to miss the train. So really, at least familiarize yourself with the technology because it's here to stay.
Fantastic, thank you. So familiarize yourself, even if you don't get your hands too dirty at this point, just familiarize yourself. Thank you very much. John, coming to you next for your tip.
I would say don't trust, always verify. And if you're going to depend on the narrative of the media, one day they'll be fully in favor of cryptocurrency and blockchain. The other day they'll just be calling it a scam or just a bubble or something of the sort. I mean, again, they'll change the narrative at every given week. I would say that whatever is being said, even said by myself or the people here on the panel, don't just take it at face value. Go out there and verify it for yourself. Formulate your own opinion. I think that's the best advice I can give at this stage.
Thank you, John. Great advice there as well. And finally, Joshua?
Yeah, I would say just investigate, really. Look into the material and get familiar. Because when you think about it, what this technology can bring is more democracy or less democracy. And democracy isn't always good in every situation. But this brings the power for us to decide where we want to democratize and decentralize and where we don't. So I think just get your hands dirty, read a lot, because change is coming at some point.
And that's it. I think the message from all three of you there is that change is coming, and that we have an opportunity to be part of it and hopefully to shape it for the future that we want as well. So thank you very much to my panel today. You've been great, giving us great advice there. I'm sure our viewers are going to have questions, so they can add them into Facebook, and I'm sure the three of you will keep an eye on the comments and hopefully add your incredible insight as we go along. So thank you to you, my panel today. It's been great to have you, and thank you as always to the viewers watching us at home or in the office. Lovely to have you with us again on the Boardroom, and I look forward to seeing you on a future episode. Goodbye.
Thanks for the invitation. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.